The courtroom was buzzing with whispers, the air heavy with tension. People filled every seat, shoulder to shoulder, their eyes locked on the defendant's table. The name James Carter had dominated headlines for weeks, and now here he was, towering, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most people's yearly rent. He strode in with a smirk, his slicked-back hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It was the kind of smile that said, "I own this room." But to everyone else, it felt like mockery. James was the kind of rich that seemed untouchable. He owned yachts, mansions on both coasts, and private jets. His company, Carter Investments, was once seen as a symbol of financial brilliance. But behind the glossy advertisements and promises of a brighter future, there was betrayal. He had preyed on trust. Promising families a better life, he lured them into investing everything: retirement savings, college funds, inheritances. When the truth came out, it was too late. The money was gone. Homes were foreclosed. Parents were forced to tell their children, "We can't afford this anymore." For some, the betrayal wasn't just financial, it was the shattering of hope. When Judge Eleanor Kim entered the courtroom, her presence alone silenced the room. She was known for her fairness, her calm authority, and her unwavering commitment to justice. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Kim," the bailiff announced. The crowd rose as one, everyone except James. He stayed seated, flipping through a notepad like this was just another meeting. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but James waved him off without looking up. Judge Kim paused at the bench, her gaze sharp as glass. She didn't say a word about his disrespect. Not yet, but the silence grew heavier, the tension almost unbearable. "You may be seated," she said, her voice steady. The trial began, and the weight of James's crimes unfolded. Angela Parker, a single mother of 3, sat in the front row. She'd lost her home because of him. Beside her was Tom Hayes, a retired firefighter who had spent decades saving lives, only to lose his life savings to Carter Investments. Each victim's story was a punch to the gut. Angela's voice cracked as she described the day she realized she couldn't make her mortgage payment. "I begged them not to take the house," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But they didn't care. My kids and I slept in our car for 2 weeks. Do you know what it's like to tell your children they can't go home?" Tom's testimony was just as heartbreaking. "I spent 30 years running into burning buildings," he said, his voice heavy with anger. "And this man burned my future to the ground without a second thought." Through it all, James sat there, unbothered. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone, occasionally whispering to his lawyer. To him, their stories were nothing more than background noise. The prosecution presented damning evidence. Emails where James explicitly instructed his team to falsify documents. One email read, "Make the numbers look good. We need these suckers to sign." The courtroom fell silent as the words were read aloud. Angela shook her head in disbelief. Tom clenched his fists. "James?" He smirked. When asked to confirm the email, James leaned into the microphone, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Yes, I recognize it," he said. "But let's not pretend it means what you're implying. It's just business talk. You wouldn't understand." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's gavel struck like thunder. "Order in the court," Judge Kim commanded. Her gaze locked on James. "Mr. Carter, I advise you to watch your tone. This is not a boardroom." But James wasn't fazed. He continued to mock the process, rolling his eyes, laughing at the prosecutor's questions, and even whispering jokes to his lawyer during testimonies. The turning point came during Angela's testimony. She stood at the witness stand, clutching a crumpled piece of paper, her hands trembling. "I trusted you," she said, her voice breaking. "I trusted you with everything I had, and you destroyed my family." James didn't look up. He scrolled through his phone, completely detached. Your Honor, the prosecutor interrupted, pointing toward James. The defendant is not paying attention. Judge Kim's face was calm, but her eyes burned with fury. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice icy, put your phone away, now. James glanced up, unfazed. I'm checking something important, he said, holding up the device like it was an excuse. I said now. For a moment, it looked like he might argue, but he set the phone down with a sigh, as if he were doing the judge a favor. Angela continued, her voice shaking with disbelief. I don't understand how someone can be so heartless, she said. I don't understand how you can sit there and act like none of this matters. By the time the trial ended, the evidence was insurmountable. James's lawyer tried to paint him as misunderstood, but the truth was undeniable. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled for space, victims clutched each other's hands, and James sat at the defense table, his smirk still intact. Judge Kim's voice was steady as she spoke. Mr. Carter, you have been found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and your behavior throughout this trial has been appalling. You have shown no remorse, no accountability, and no respect for this court or the people you've harmed. James's smirk faltered. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Kim declared. Gasps filled the room. Furthermore, I am ordering the liquidation of your assets to repay your victims. Every dollar you stole will be returned. James shot up, his face red with anger. You can't do this, he shouted. I'm James Carter. You can't treat me like this. Judge Kim's gavel slammed down. This is my courtroom, Mr. Carter. Sit down. As James was escorted out, the courtroom erupted in applause. Angela Parker pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tom Hayes let out a shaky breath, his eyes glistening. Outside the courthouse, Angela spoke to reporters. No sentence will undo the damage, she said. But at least now we have hope. For Judge Kim, there was no victory in the sentence, only a quiet resolve. Justice wasn't about punishment, it was about accountability. And for the first time, James Carter was forced to face it.